It's episode 527 of the Locked On Texas Rangers podcast. On today's episode, I'm ranking prospects number 21 through 25 on my road to the top 30 Rangers prospects before this season, leading up to hopefully spring training. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On the Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Brice Paterik, here today, ranking Rangers prospect as I am every Monday from now until hopefully the start of spring training, maybe even the start of the regular season. Just kidding. We're not going to get that far. I don't have that many prospects ranked. But first, I want to thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Brice Paterik. Follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube or wherever the heck you get your podcast. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by opening day, which, you know, might happen, might be more likely if they postpone the start of the season. Anyway, there is a little bit of news that I want to talk just very briefly about before I go into these rankings, because I am pretty excited about most of these guys. But the ownership and the Players Association did meet last Thursday. I'll talk more about what they talked about, but there's some new proposals that came out of what owners are talking about, and it looks like a lot of the major changes are off the table. So maybe we will still see no DH in the NL and a DH in the AL. I don't know what all is going on there, but I'm hoping they figure it out in the next month or so. So maybe I can get to spring training and see some of these guys that I am talking to you about today. But if you haven't listened to the first part of the series or the first edition of the rankings, I encourage you to go ahead and do that. I went through 5 different guys that I really liked in the last edition of this, leaving off with Bubba Thompson. And I talked about those rankings with Grant Schiller last week on those episodes. I'll probably talk a little bit about my rankings this week with him as well, plus what happened in that. But let's go ahead and get into the prospects. We are on number 25. I'm doing more prospects than I did last year. So, yeah, there's a lot more guys to talk about and a lot of guys that I'm just genuinely really excited about. The state of the Rangers farm is in a good place, and this guy kind of proves that. He is a guy who was not on my list last year, and if you put me at mid-season, I might have had him a little higher on the list. He didn't finish the year super well, but I am definitely encouraged with the stuff that I saw out of this guy. Number 25 is, of course, Avery Weems, the left-handed starting pitcher. He is 24 years old, which, you know, everybody except for one prospect, one prospect in these 5 today is 24 years old. Didn't intentionally do that, but it's just kind of how things ended up. He is a left-handed pitcher. He was born on June 6th, so he won't turn 25 until the middle of this year. He's listed at 6'2" and 205 pounds. Last year he was not in my rankings, and MLB Pipeline's ranking, he is 28th. He is not in the top 10 of BA or BP, and on The Athletic, Jamie Newberg has him at 21 in his ranking, so a little bit higher than I have him. But he was part of the Lance Lynn trade. That's how he got here. He was a 6th-round pick, 170th overall in the 2019 draft. He finished the season at low A Hickory, or high A Hickory, not low A. Gosh, I keep getting those. I'm gonna keep messing that up until probably the end of time, unless they rename one of them, and then I'll know that one's always lower than the other one. But anyway, he had a pretty solid season in 2021. 20 games, 85 and a third innings, 124 strikeouts to just 27 walks. That's a 4.59 strikeout to walk ratio. Love to see that. The problem with him this year was the home run. 16 home runs in those 85 and a third innings. That's not great. A 122 whip is fine. This MLB ETA, I don't know how to place this one. I think maybe around 2025, but that seems like about where he'll be. But as for who he is, I first thought he was just kind of a throw-in in the Dane Dunning trade, since there wasn't a whole lot of info on him. He'd only pitched in one season at that point. But the more I've seen, the more I've read about him, the more scouts really like this kid. The analytical models really like this kid. And Chicago's scouts and analytical models both liked him. That's why they drafted him out of Arizona, even though there wasn't a whole bunch that was super impressive. But what he did in his first minor league season was really solid, and what he did in strokes is what really sold the Rangers on him and why they wanted to get him in that trade as an inclusion. But in his first minor league season, in 2019, he spent it between Great Falls Voyagers and the Rookie League. The Rookie League, he did incredibly well in 13 innings. He had a 0.69 ERA, which is pretty darn nice if I do say so myself. He also struck out 14 in 13 innings. And with, what was that team that I just said? Great Falls Voyagers. In 10 starts, he went 47 and a third innings, 2.47 ERA, and struck out 60 while walking just 7. So his strikeout to walk ratio was even better in that first season. Still pretty solid in this season. I like that he was striking out a bunch of guys. End of the season, in 85 innings, had a 5.06 ERA. Not exactly what you're looking for, but he's a lefty whose curveball is just straight up nasty. His slider is also really stinking good. Both of those project as potential plus future pitches. The changeup, that's going to determine how he sticks as a starter. It's a real question. It's really lagging behind the other pitches right now. It's like I said, he's 6'2", so he's about average ability. He's not some big huge hoss. He throws in the low 90s. He's touched 96, and he gets a little bit of movement on that fastball, which makes it play up just a little bit. But he's not super tall. Doesn't have a super high release point, so that's not making it play up that much. So if he can add a few miles per hour on his velocity, it needs a little bit more projection. But I think this guy can really be a back-end starter. You have those two plus potential future breaking pitches, and that really helps carry a profile. The scouts really love this guy. I think there's more to him than the numbers. There's a reason why the Rangers wanted him so desperately. Just because his first season as a Texas Rangers prospect didn't go as great as it seemed doesn't mean that there's not a reason to rank this guy as good, as highly as I did. Obviously, Jamie Newberg is a little bit higher on him than I do. To be honest, I had him a little higher, and I kind of changed my mind at the last minute with somebody who I switched him with, because the next guy on my list, I couldn't have him as the highest lefty. I do really believe in his profile, but there's one lefty who I think is a little bit better than him, and that guy is as follows. Number 24 on this list is going to be coming up right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. It's the new year, which means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure to include Built Bar as a part of your plan. Built Bar makes it so easy to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you'll actually want to eat it, unlike those other things. You want to eat healthy, but it gets so boring. By like week 3, by like now it's January 17th as I'm recording this, and you're just like, okay, where's the chocolate? I need me some chocolate. But Built Bars, they got the chocolate for you, and they're good for you. Most of them contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. They are fantastic. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Now, like I teased before, this next guy is a left-handed pitcher, a guy who I really like and had a great season, especially when you consider where he came from. That's right. It's Cole Ragans, who is, I believe, the top left-handed pitcher on my list. Let me go double-check those. Yeah, he's a top lefty on my list, and I feel pretty darn good about it. This guy, honestly, like the fact that he pitched the whole year is truly incredible, given what he has gone through. He hadn't pitched professionally since 2017. He's had 2 Tommy John surgeries. I don't want to blame him for this because it's not his fault, but I think the Rangers, a lot of their deload program was reacting to Cole Ragans' elbow injuries, and that's kind of why they did it. It didn't work out, and I don't want to just come down on them because it did. I don't blame them for trying something different at the time. Granted, it was a horrible disaster, but they had so many guys, so many top guys having so many injuries that it's worrisome. And in case you don't know, 2 Tommy Johns is basically the max that you can have if you want to still be pitching. This is pretty much it. He's 24 years old, listed at 6'4", 190 pounds. He is a lefty who was drafted in 2016, 30th overall. I think he gets the big leagues about next year, not quite this year, and I think they're going to really have to make a tough decision. They let them off the 40-man roster this year, but granted, there was no Major League Rule 5 draft, so that kind of saved him. So but they believe in this kid, and there were a lot of expectations put on him early on. There was a very very low floor for a guy who was a high school pitcher. And thank God he was, because if he wasn't, then he'd be like 27 at this point, and any hopes at a major league career would be really, really questionable. His changeup is his best pitch. He's also got a pretty solid curveball and slider. His fastball's fine. He got a $2 million bonus when he was signed, and in short season, the Northwest League, he had 87 strikeouts in 57 and a third innings. This guy has done very well to be pitching this year, for his arm to just stay attached. That's what I said I wanted from him at the beginning of this year. I'm like, can he just stay healthy? Can he keep pitching? And he did more than that. He was really good at the lower level, then ended up getting promoted to Frisco. Didn't do as well there, but in Hickory, he pitched 44 and a third innings in 10 starts, 3.25 ERA at that time, and 54 strikeouts to 14 walks, held batters to a 217 average and a 1.08 whip. Those were some really solid numbers, and he earned the promotion. He pitched in 9 games. Only 7 of those were starts, had a 5.70 ERA in 36 and a third innings, and struck out 33 and walked 20 in those 36 and a third innings in Double-A. So the numbers weren't nearly as great. But again, he's exhausted. The fact that he could go 80 and 2/3 innings after not pitching professionally since 2017 is honestly incredible. He's obviously got that stuff. He's got that caliber. He's still got that poise to him that the Rangers liked when they drafted him back all those years ago, that he's a guy who couldn't really be rattled, who knew what he was doing on the mound and had confidence in himself. Even after those surgeries, he still has confidence in himself, and that is something that you love to see. I mean, we saw it with Neftali Feliz. Once he had that first Tommy John surgery, he just couldn't really trust himself to throw. And it happens with other guys as well, especially guys who have that kind of promise. And, I just really loved what I saw from him this year. I think he's a big leaguer. I think he will make the big leagues in some capacity. To what capacity, I don't know. I think if everything still breaks, I still believe in him with the ceiling of a number 3 starter. I still think that is attainable. And I am really curious to see what he does this year, where the Rangers put him, how he responds, how his elbow holds up to all of that, and how many innings they let him go. Because that's going to be a really, really interesting question to see what they do with this kid. And he's somebody who I think really, really needs to have more of a structured spring training. And so maybe him not being on the 40-man and having his run of the facilities has been good for him to be able to, get those workouts in, to make sure that the Rangers, to make sure that he's taking care of that elbow and that he can continue to pitch well next year and stay healthy again, because that would be awesome. Now, granted, he's not going to live up to what the Rangers thought of him when they first drafted him, but that's okay. The fact that he's still here, still kicking after 2 Tommy John surgeries before the age of 24 is honestly incredible, and I'm really proud of the season that this guy had. Now, this next guy, a little bit different, also 24 years old, because that's just the theme for today. Another pitcher who is a righty. He is a guy who, I hadn't thought about that much. I saw a little bit of him in Frisco this year. He had a really, really solid season. I'm not quite as high on him as everybody else. I feel like maybe I'm a little lower, but I still believe this guy can do some pretty solid things. And this guy is number 23, Yerry Rodriguez. He's a 24-year-old righty. He was signed at nearly the age of 18. That's why people don't think about him as much. He wasn't as high on the prospect list. He is 24 years old, listed at 6'2", 198, and he's probably going to make the big leagues maybe at some point this year in some capacity. We'll see if he can stick as a starter. If he can, that really, really raises his profile. He's got 3 pitches that are all plus potential. The fastball has a lot of life. That is his main pitch, but he only signed for $60K out of the Dominican Republic back when the Rangers did sign him in 2015. So he wasn't on a whole lot of radars. He missed most of 2017. He had a 75-game suspension after testing positive for a banned diuretic. But once he came stateside the next year, he was absolutely killing it. 82 strikeouts to 8 walks in his U.S. debut in 2018. Then goes ahead and logs a 2.08 ERA. Ended up missing a little bit of time with a sprained elbow that year, but he did make a spot on the 40-man roster. Now, this year, he split time between Double-A and Triple-A. It was not a great showing for him in AAA, but in AA, he had 14 starts, 51 and a third innings, a 2.63 ERA with 63 strikeouts to 21 walks, a 1.14 whip, and only 3 home runs in those over 50 innings. That's what you love to see. What you don't love to see is what happened to him in AAA. He has dominated every single level he's been at until he hit AAA. Things did not go nearly as well for him. He pitched in 13 games, but only 4 of those were starts. He had 30 and a third innings, got roughed up a little bit. He got hit for 5 home runs in those 30 innings, an 8.01 ERA. Opposing batters hit 298 against him, and he had a 1.62 whip. I think he definitely has to start the season in AAA. You want to see what happened there. I mean, granted, it was only 4 of those games were starts, but that's a little concerning for me. Even if he is in the bullpen, a guy with 3+ pitches that'll probably play up a little bit once he gets into the bullpen, that is going to be really, really nasty. His fastball sits 92 to 96. He also touches 98. That could definitely hit triple digits if he's in the pen. I think that is something that might be in his future. But, again, there's still some concern there. But I think this guy has definitely got a lot of potential, and if things break well for him, he could be a number 3 starter. You have 3+ pitches. That is a solid, genuine MLB-rated starter, and yeah, he's definitely got that potential. I don't think there's that many other people in the system who has a potential for 3+ pitches outside of, like, I don't know, like Jack Leiter and some of the other guys a little higher on this list, but there's really not that many. So he's a guy with a lot of upside, still a lot of question marks, but a guy who is definitely worth keeping an eye or two, or, you know, if you have your third eye open, then you might as well keep that on him. But if you've got that third eye and you use it to make bets, and you want to use it to make bets on sports, you should go to Bet Online. Bet Online would like to wish everyone a happy New Year as we continue the march to the playoffs and beyond. Bet Online, I don't want to talk about the Cowboys playoffs, so, you know, we'll just pretend that we're talking about, you know, the Mavericks playoffs or the Stars playoffs or just some other team that isn't the stupid Dallas Cowboys. If you want to bet on some other team that isn't the Cowboys, you can do that at Bet Online. It's a new year and a new updated desktop and mobile website. Sign today, receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. Bet Online, where the game starts. Now, let's take a look at this next guy on my list, a guy who also has a pretty solid load of potential, a guy who is a part of a draft that, you know, I didn't love at first, a guy who I wasn't as high on until I started looking more at him, which, you know, kind of makes sense for this guy's draft. But this guy is number 22, Thomas Sagacy. Maybe it's Sagacy. Not entirely sure. I haven't heard it pronounced out loud. But he's 19 years old. He'll be turning 20 on April 10th. He plays third base. He also plays second base. He also plays shortstop. He played shortstop mostly in high school, but, you know, he didn't get that many reps at the position because Luis Angel Acuna was there at his level. So, again, it kind of makes sense why he didn't get a whole lot of shortstop reps. If they're not at the same place, then we'll see how many reps he get. But he is a right-handed thrower, right-handed batter, listed at 5'11", 175 pounds. Last year he was not on my rankings, and he is unranked on MLB, Baseball America, and Baseball Prospectus, but The Athletic has him at 27th on their rankings. How did he get here? Well, he was the Rangers' final pick in the abbreviated 2020 draft, 5th round, 145th overall. He spent the season at Low A Down East, where he played 73 games, had 288 plate appearances, put up a slash line of 256, on base of 372, slugged 463. That's an 893 OPS for those of you doing the math at home. Those of you who are not, it's more for those of you who are not doing the math at home. But he hit 10 home runs, 3 triples, 14 doubles, walked 42 times to just 85 strikeouts, and stole 25 bases. When is he going to get to major leagues? I'm not exactly sure, but I'd say, I don't know, maybe around late 2024, early 2025. I'm leaning more towards early 2025. This kid is still very young. He's going to be 20 this year for the entire season, and I'm not exactly sure where the Rangers are going to put him. I wouldn't be surprised if they put him at Hickory, and then we'll see how well he does. He could end up being a guy who progresses through the system pretty fast for his age, but he was the final pick of a 2020 draft that's looking better and better by the day. I mean, at the time, this draft we're going to look back I already look back, and it's been a year and a half, maybe, since this draft. And what I was saying about the Rangers and what they did versus how I feel now is just a complete 180, as is what pretty much everyone else is saying. Actually, I don't know if everyone else has kind of come aboard yet to see that the Rangers made really, really great picks at the time. I did say at the time that the Rangers, like, not many people. I know that scouting was also hurt in 2020 by there being basically no high school season and not seeing a whole lot of these guys. But I think Major League Scouts were okay. They made up for it. But the prospect writers and those guys, I think they were way more in the dark than Major League teams are. I mean, they already are comparatively, but like even more so. But Keith Law described the Rangers as the most perplexing draft of all, and he said 4 of their 5 picks appear to be significant overdrafts. He just did not like any of those guys except for Tekoa Roby. I'm still going to be goofing up that name. But their 5 picks that year, the Athletic gave them a D overall. But they picked Justin Foscue, 14th overall. I didn't like that pick. Ended up looking like a really good pick. In the second round, they got Evan Carter, 50th overall. He wasn't even on Baseball America's top 500. Look how he's turned out. TK Roby, 3rd round. 4th round is Dylan McLean, who hasn't done super great. He was a left-handed pitcher out of high school in Oregon. And their 5th round pick, Thomas Sagacy, out of Carlsbad High School in California. Now, he put up some really, really solid numbers, like I said, in 73 games, just under 300 plate appearances. He was solid. I mean, this was his minor league debut. I don't know what the heck they were doing with the Rangers in 2020 with their minor leaguers, but whatever they did, especially with those kids that just got drafted, it worked. Whatever they did worked tremendously, because these guys there were huge question marks about them, about Evan Carter, about Sagacy, about Foscue as well, and Roby, and they all overperformed. Only McLean, 1 out of 5, underperforms, and the rest way outshoot what anyone else thought of what they were going to do. That draft is looking better and better by the day. I hated it at the time, but I did hedge my bets just a little bit in saying I have no idea how this is going to turn out. It could end up being a disaster, or it could be a total steal, and we won't know for another few years. Well, it's looking like we kind of know a little bit already. I mean, these guys might not turn out to be what I think they are at this day, but at this moment, that draft is looking better and better and better. Sagacy is, I don't know where he is positionally. There's not a whole lot of data on him. There's not a whole lot of people who have seen him, and I haven't read that much about anybody who's seen him and what he profiles as defensively. I'm assuming he's going to stick at 3rd base, maybe 2nd base. We'll see. And, because right now he's definitely not anywhere near where Luis Angel Acuna is. Obviously, he is, 22 on my list, whereas Acuna is higher. You'll see him in here later. Spoiler, I didn't leave off one of pretty much a consensus top 10 overall prospect in the Rangers system. But I love what I saw from him. Some great stuff. I love the batter's eye. I love that he's already showing power as a 19-year-old. That is definitely encouraging. The walk rate is definitely encouraging. The on-base is encouraging. And a guy who has a really high ceiling if things break right. I don't know where I see him. This is a guy who just is performing way better than anyone expected. So that's encouraging, and we'll see what he does next year, where the Rangers assign him, what positions he plays. There are so many questions about this guy, but right now, all things about him are pointing to a really solid, potential, consistent starting first division player for a good team. And that is way more than anybody thought of this kid that they drafted in the 5th round of a pandemic draft. Now, at 21, this guy isn't as sexy. He's a lot more well-known. He does have positional versatility, just like Thomas Sagacy. And it's number 21, Davis Wenzel. He is 24 years old, so back to the 24-year-olds. He is a utility player. He plays everywhere. I don't know if he's played much in center field, but I'm sure he could play there. He's played shortstop. He's played third base. He's played second base. He's played first base. He's played the corner outfield. I don't think he's played catcher. I don't think he's going to do that. But he's a guy who was drafted out of Baylor. He is listed at, where'd we go? He's a little higher on this list, so I just scroll up a little bit. But he's listed at 6'1", 206 pounds. The Rangers drafted him out of Baylor. He projects to have a potential plus hit tool. The power hasn't come along quite like I thought, but he was the 2019 41st overall pick. Other rankings, I did not have him ranked last year. Pipeline has him at 11, which is real high, and I think higher than anybody else. BP and BA do not have him ranked in their top 10s. The Athletic has him at 16, so they're a little higher on him than I am those other places, but, I feel good about him. He ended the season in AAA this year. In AA, that's where he played the most games. He played 45 games, 159 at-bats, had a slash line of 239, 348, and 390. That's a 738 OPS. He had 6 home runs, 6 doubles, and 21 walks to 43 strikeouts. I think he makes the big leagues this year. And of position players that are in the bottom 15 of my top 30, there is no one I am more confident will have at least a 5-year big league career of the position players than this guy. He profiles as a guy who will play everywhere, a Charlie Culberson type, which isn't sexy, but as we saw, teams need Charlie Culberson types. He's a guy who's going to hold down a big league roster spot for many a year. He's got an incredible beard, great flow. That's not part of his profile. I guess it is kind of technically part of his profile, but the only question I have about him is, can he hit for a little bit more power? That's what I'd like to see. He won 2019 Big 12 Co-Player of the Year with Josh Young, and when the Rangers drafted him, I thought, okay, well, this is kind of a similar guy to him out of Baylor in 2019. He played in 46 games, hit 8 home runs, and had his triple slash line of 367, 484, and 610. Every single year at Baylor, all 3 of his years, he had a batting average over 300. He had an on-base over 400 and slugged over 500. That's pretty hard to do, especially doing that at his age, his first year at Baylor. I know it's not a sexy profile, and, a couple of years ago when I had different priorities, I don't know if he even would have made my top 30. Well, also he was a little younger back then, so it would have made sense. Also, even more than a couple years ago, he wasn't on the Rangers until 2019. So there. But this guy is solid. I feel very confident this guy is going to have a long big league career. If he can develop a little more power, then I think he can be a pretty solid starter for a pretty solid team for 10 years. I think this guy's going to have like a 10-year big league career. I could be wrong, but I think he's going to end up being a guy who bounces around the league, is a great clubhouse guy, a guy who people love having on their team, and makes a solid living as a big leaguer. That's important. Some of these other guys, I don't know how confident that they'll be in the major leagues for a long time. I mean, Sagacy had a really great year, and his ceiling is most definitely a lot higher than Wenzel. But I don't know. There's a lot of things that can happen between low A and the big leagues. It is a huge jump, a lot of years that are going to go by between that. But Wenzel's right there on the cusp. He's right there. He had a really solid 8 games in Round Rock. He didn't play as many games as I would have liked to see him in this year, only 63 games total. But in Round Rock, he had a 333 on base and slugged 464. Granted, that's only in 33 plate appearances. He had 1 home run and 4 doubles in that span, walked twice to 8 strikeouts, and a 214 area code. No, 214 batting average. So, I don't know. We'll see. I think he'll start the season in AAA, but he is going to make his big league debut by the season's end. I feel pretty confident in saying that. Maybe they'll give him a full season at AAA, but once the AAA season's done, I don't see why they wouldn't, at the very least, give him a cup of coffee at the end of the year. A good, solid player. Didn't love the pick at the time, but I think that he is a solid guy. And the Rangers should be pretty happy with their choice. Granted, they probably think that he would develop a little bit more power as well, and I think he's still got a little bit of that in there. I don't know, but at 24, you kind of are what you are. But right now, what he is a guy who is really solid defensively. He played third base in Baylor, at Baylor, and I thought, okay, this guy's just going to be a third baseman, so he's going to really have to hit, really have to pick it. He can really pick it at all the places that I saw him play. He's a legit shortstop, not elite, but solid. He can play a really good third base. He can play some second base. I'm sure he's fine at first base. I didn't see him in the corner outfield, but I'm sure he's solid there. He's got pretty quick movements and a pretty good feel for baseball and solid baseball skills. So I like this guy. I think he's solid. I think he has a long big league career. It's not going to be flashy or famous or any all-star games, I don't think, in his future. He could prove me wrong and start hitting for a crap ton of power. Bat-to-ball skills are really good, and the plate discipline is solid. That's good, especially with defensive positional versatility. That's always helpful. And, things could break well down the road. But he's solid. He's about as solid as they come. Not sexy, although that beard and flow, much sex appeal for the ladies. So, yeah, a solid guy, solid pick. Some solid guys for this in this system. This is, again, the state of the system is great, and these guys might not be as flashy as some of the other guys, but I feel really good about all 5 of these dudes, especially Cole Ragans, the season that he had, and Thomas Sagacy has a whole lot of ceiling in his future. But those high floor guys, you can't forget about them too. Every team needs 26 or 25 guys, depending on how many roster spots they give you. And having these guys on your roster makes for a pretty good, solid, complete team. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. Again, if you're not already, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Brice Paterik. Follow the show at Locked On Rangers. And subscribe on YouTube, pretty please. I will keep asking, even if you do it. If you have already done it, thank you. Thank you very much. I love you forever. But if you haven't, just it's one button. I would appreciate the click. Anyway, that'll do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. I'll be back at some point, probably on Wednesday, with Grant, talking about what was said in those meetings, talking about these prospects, all that and more, coming up later in this week on Locked On Rangers. But until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.